A poor woman crashes a billionaire's twins' funeral, screaming the unthinkable. They're not dead! Everyone stares, because she's dirty, shaking, and claims she can hear their heartbeats when every doctor said the children were gone. But when the coffins open, and tiny fingers suddenly twitch, the entire crowd erupts. Now this poor woman becomes the only person the family can rely on, because something far darker is happening behind closed doors. Someone close wants those twins gone, and she's the only one who can sense the danger coming. But why can she hear what no one else can? And when the real enemy steps out of the shadows, can she save the twins again before it's too late? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Dawn painted the sky in muted shades of grey as mourners filed silently through the ornate gates of Gravesend Memorial Gardens. A bitter winter wind cut through their black coats and dark suits, matching the somber mood that hung heavy over the gathering. Frost glazed the perfectly manicured lawn, crunching softly beneath polished shoes as the city's elite made their way to the white canopy erected for the service. At the front, two small white coffins lay side by side, drowning in a sea of white lilies and roses. Their pristine surfaces seemed to mock the darkness of the occasion. Gareth Langford stood rigidly beside them, his usually commanding presence diminished by grief. His face was drawn and pale, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Beside him, Elena Langford swayed slightly, her eyes red-rimmed and distant as she stared at the tiny coffins that held her children. The whispers among the mourners were barely audible, but full of the same questions that had circled the city for weeks. How could two healthy children decline so suddenly? What mysterious illness had claimed the Langford twins, leaving doctors baffled and a family shattered? The minister stepped forward, his Bible clutched in weathered hands. We gather here today to remember Noah and Grace Langford, beloved children taken far too soon from... A commotion at the back of the gathering cut through his words. Heads turned as a young woman burst through the neat rows of mourners, her bare feet leaving marks in the frost-covered grass. Her dark skin was flushed from running, and her clothes, a thin jacket and worn jeans, were hardly suitable for the winter morning. Wild-eyed and breathing hard, she moved with desperate purpose toward the coffins. "Stop!" Paisley Thompson's voice cracked with emotion and urgency. "You can't bury them. I can hear them." Security guards moved quickly to intercept her, but Paisley dodged their grasp, stumbling forward. "Please, listen to me. Their hearts, I can hear their hearts beating!" Gasps rippled through the crowd. An elderly woman clutched her pearls, whispering loudly about that poor, disturbed girl. Others began to back away, creating a bubble of space around Paisley as she continued to move forward, her hands outstretched. "Someone called the police," a man in an expensive suit demanded, while others pulled out their phones to record the scene. Gareth Langford's face darkened with fury. "Remove her," he commanded, his voice hoarse, but carrying authority even in grief. "How dare you disturb my children's funeral?" But Paisley stood her ground, even as two security guards grabbed her arms. She didn't struggle against their hold, but her eyes remained fixed on the coffins. "I've always been able to hear heartbeats," she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "Even the faintest ones. Please, your children aren't dead. I can hear them." The crowd's murmuring grew louder. Some called for an ambulance, assuming Paisley was having a mental breakdown. Others demanded the guards remove her more forcefully. The minister stood frozen, his Bible forgotten in his hands as the solemn ceremony dissolved into chaos. "She's clearly unstable," someone said loudly. "Poor thing needs help." Paisley's body trembled, but her voice remained steady. "I know you have no reason to believe me. I know how this looks. But I'm begging you, check again. They're alive. Weak, but alive. As the security guards began to drag her away, Elena Langford, who had been standing in shocked silence, suddenly gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth as recognition dawned in her eyes. She took an unsteady step forward, her black dress swishing against the frosted grass. "Wait." Elena's voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through the chaos like a knife. "Wait," she said again, louder this time. The security guards paused, still holding Paisley firmly. Elena moved closer, her eyes wide with disbelief. "I know you," she breathed, studying Paisley's face intently. "I remember you." The crowd fell absolutely silent. Even the winter wind seemed to hold its breath as Elena Langford, grieving mother and respected philanthropist, stood face to face with the disheveled young woman who had crashed her children's funeral. Gareth stepped forward, confusion evident on his face. "Elena?" But Elena remained focused on Paisley, her hand reaching out tentatively as if to touch her face but stopping short. "You're the girl from the children's home," she said, her voice trembling. 10 years ago. You tried to tell us about that little boy's heart condition, the one none of the doctors had caught." Her eyes filled with fresh tears. "You were right then. They found it just in time to save him." The silence deepened as every person present absorbed this revelation. Paisley stood perfectly still in the guard's grip, her own tears falling freely now as she nodded. "Yes, Mrs. Langford, that was me, and I'm right now too. Please, you have to believe me." The entire gathering remained frozen in this tableau. The grieving parents, the mysterious young woman, the stunned mourners, and between them all, 2 small white coffins holding secrets that would shake their world to its core. Elena's recognition of Paisley had turned what everyone assumed was a tragic interruption into something entirely different, something that held the possibility of either miracle or deeper heartbreak. In that moment, as dawn fully broke over Gravesend Memorial Gardens, not a single person moved. The weight of Paisley's claim and Eleanor's recognition hung in the air like the morning frost, waiting for the next breath, the next word, the next decision that would change everything. The silence shattered as Gareth Langford stepped forward, his face contorted with a mix of grief and confusion. "Elena, what are you talking about? How do you know this woman?" Elena's hand trembled as she reached for her husband's arm. "Gareth, 10 years ago, when I was volunteering at St. Martha's Children's Home, Paisley was there. She saved a child's life by insisting she could hear his failing heart." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "The doctors found a severe defect that would have killed him within months. She knew, Gareth. She just knew." The morning air felt electric with tension as hundreds of eyes darted between the grieving parents and Paisley, who stood quietly now, no longer restrained but making no move to leave. Her bare feet had left marks in the frost-covered grass, and she hugged herself against the cold. "This is preposterous." A sharp voice cut through the murmuring crowd. Victor Langford, impeccably dressed in a black suit, strode forward. His silver hair caught the early morning light as he positioned himself between Paisley and the coffins. "We cannot allow this disruption to continue. These poor children deserve dignity in death." "But what if she's right?" Elena's voice cracked with desperate hope. "What if there's even the slightest chance?" Gareth ran a hand through his greying hair, his composure cracking. "Elena, we saw them. The doctors confirmed. Then checking will silence this once and for all." Elena interrupted, turning to the funeral director, who stood awkwardly to the side. "Please, Mr. Reynolds, open them." The funeral director shifted uncomfortably, his hands fidgeting with his tie. "Mr. Langford, I would need your authorization." "This is madness!" Victor's voice rose sharply. You cannot seriously consider disturbing your children's rest based on the ravings of some vagrant." He gestured dismissively at Paisley's threadbare clothing. But Paisley's quiet voice carried across the space between them. "Sir." She addressed Gareth directly, ignoring Victor completely. "I hear 2 heartbeats. They're weak, so weak I almost missed them at first. But they're there, like butterfly wings against a window." Elena sobbed, clutching Gareth's arm tighter. "Please," she whispered. "Please, just check." The crowd held its collective breath as Gareth Langford stood frozen, torn between propriety and possibility. The weight of his decision seemed to press down on his shoulders, aging him years in moments. Finally, he gave a sharp nod. "Do it," he commanded the funeral director. "Open them." "Gareth, you can't—" Victor started, but Gareth silenced him with a look. "They're my children, Victor. My decision." The funeral director moved forward with shaking hands, gesturing to his assistants. The crowd pressed closer as the first coffin's lid was carefully unsealed. The sound seemed to echo across the silent cemetery. Elena gripped Paisley's hand suddenly, seeking strength or offering it, perhaps both. Paisley squeezed back, her eyes fixed on the coffin. As the lid was raised, someone in the crowd screamed. Within the white satin lining, Noah Langford's small fingers twitched ever so slightly. "Oh my God!" The funeral director stumbled backward. "Oh my God!" Before anyone could move, a faint tapping sound emerged from Grace's still-sealed coffin. "Get them out!" Elena screamed, surging forward. "Get her out!" The second coffin was quickly opened, revealing Grace's hand moving weakly against the coffin's interior. The crowd erupted into chaos. Some people fell to their knees praying, others pulled out phones to call for help, and still others backed away in horror. "I need medical assistance immediately at Gravesend Memorial Gardens." Victor's assistant was shouting into a phone. "2 pediatric emergencies. Yes, immediate." Paisley had not moved from her spot, tears streaming down her face as she watched paramedics rush onto the scene, their equipment looking startlingly modern against the traditional cemetery backdrop. They worked quickly, efficiently, lifting the children's frighteningly still forms onto gurneys. "Vital signs present but critically weak," one paramedic called out. "We need to move now." Elena turned to Paisley, gripping her arms. "Come with us," she insisted, her eyes wild with fear and hope. "Please, you heard them when no one else could. Come with us." Paisley nodded wordlessly, allowing Elena to pull her toward the waiting ambulance. As they climbed in beside the children's gurneys, Paisley caught a glimpse of Gareth Langford still standing by the empty coffins. His face was ashen, his hands gripping the white wood, as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. The ambulance doors slammed shut, and sirens pierced the morning air. Through the back window, Paisley watched the crowd of mourners growing smaller, their black clothing stark against the cemetery's green lawn. Victor Langford's figure stood apart from the others, rigid and unmoving, watching the ambulances speed away. The empty coffins lay open beneath the rose-colored dawn sky, their white satin interiors catching the light like fresh snow, silent witnesses to the moment when death gave way to impossible hope. Beside her, Elena clutched her children's hands, whispering prayers of gratitude and plea, while the paramedics worked urgently around them. Paisley closed her eyes, focusing on the faint flutter of heartbeats that had drawn her here, beating soft but steady, like tiny birds fighting their way back to life. Through the ambulance's front window, Paisley could see other vehicles pulling aside to let them pass, their lights flashing against the early morning traffic. Behind them, a second ambulance followed closely, carrying the other twin and their father. The funeral procession transformed into a desperate race toward hope. The cemetery grew distant behind them, the open coffins lying empty beneath the winter sky, while Gareth Langford's stunned face remained fixed on the horizon where his children had disappeared, where impossible had become real, and death itself had been proven wrong. The ambulance doors burst open into the harsh, fluorescent glare of St. Mercy Children's Hospital's emergency bay. Paisley stumbled out behind the gurneys, her bare feet now covered in paper slippers someone had given her during the ride. A nurse draped a thin blanket around her shoulders, mistaking her for another patient until Elena quickly explained Paisley's presence. The emergency team moved with practiced efficiency, wheeling Noah and Grace through double doors marked Pediatric Critical Care. Paisley hung back, pressing herself against a wall as doctors and nurses swarmed around the children. Her threadbare dress, dirty from her dash through the cemetery, stood in stark contrast to the sterile hospital environment. "They need warm saline immediately," a doctor called out. "Core temperature is dangerously low." Elena refused to release Grace's small hand until a gentle nurse physically guided her aside. Gareth arrived moments later from the second ambulance, his usual commanding presence shaken. He kept looking between his children's faces and the medical equipment as if unable to process what was happening. "I want the best specialists," he demanded. "Whatever it costs, sir, we've already activated our critical care team," the charge nurse assured him. "Dr. Chen is our top pediatric specialist, and Dr. Rodriguez is a leading neurologist." Paisley watched as machines were connected, vital signs monitored, and medical terminology flew back and forth across the room. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to make herself smaller, wondering if security would eventually escort her out. But for now, everyone seemed too focused on the twins to notice her. Hours passed in a blur of tests and consultations. Elena sat in a chair between the twins' beds, holding one small hand in each of hers. Gareth paced the room, making phone calls and demanding updates. Paisley dozed fitfully in a corner chair, still able to hear the children's faint heartbeats, though they seemed slightly stronger now. Late in the afternoon, Dr. Chen called for a family meeting. Paisley started to leave, but Elena's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. "Stay," she whispered. "Please." The doctor's face was grave as she reviewed her findings. "What we are seeing defies conventional medical understanding," she began. Both children were declared deceased by qualified professionals. They had no detectable vital signs for several hours. Yet now, she gestured to the monitors showing weak but present brain activity. "How is this possible?" Gareth demanded. Dr. Rodriguez, the neurologist, stepped forward with several brain scan images. "We've never seen anything quite like this. It's as if their bodies were in some kind of suspended animation. Their cellular deterioration is minimal, which should be impossible after clinical death. The toxicology results might explain part of this," Dr. Chen added, consulting her tablet. "We found traces of a highly unusual compound in their bloodstream. It appears to be a modified version of tetrodotoxin, combined with other substances our lab is still trying to identify." Elena gasped. They were poisoned. "The compound seems designed to induce a death-like state while preserving vital organs," Dr. Rodriguez explained. "It's incredibly sophisticated and incredibly dangerous. A slightly higher dose would have killed them permanently." Gareth's face darkened with fury. "Someone did this deliberately? To my children?" "We've already notified the authorities," Dr. Chen assured him, "but right now, our priority is stabilizing their condition." Throughout the day, various specialists came and went, each equally baffled by the twins' slow but steady improvement. Paisley noticed something else too. Whenever she spoke, even quietly, both children's vital signs would spike slightly. Elena noticed it too. During one of the neural response tests, she asked Paisley to say something to Grace. Paisley leaned close to the little girl's ear. "You're safe now, Butterfly," she whispered. The brain activity monitor immediately showed increased response. The doctors were fascinated but couldn't explain it. They ran more tests, had Paisley speak from different distances, tried having others speak to compare responses. But the connection between Paisley's voice and the twins' reactions remained consistent. As night fell, the twins were deemed stable enough to be moved to a private suite in the pediatric wing. The room was large and softly lit, with comfortable chairs for family members and cheerful murals on the walls. Equipment had been arranged discreetly around the beds, though the steady beeping of monitors remained a constant reminder of the children's fragile state. Elena hadn't left the twins' side for more than a few minutes all day. Now she sat in the gathering darkness, looking exhausted but unwilling to rest. Paisley had changed into scrubs borrowed from the hospital staff and was preparing to find somewhere else to go when Elena spoke. "Would you—" She hesitated, then continued softly. "Would you consider staying nearby, just for tonight? They seem to respond to you so strongly." Paisley glanced at Gareth, expecting objection, but he was staring out the window, his shoulders tense with barely contained emotion. After everything that had happened, after all the questions still unanswered, he seemed unable to argue with anything that might help his children. "Of course," Paisley replied quietly. "I'll stay as long as you need me." A nurse brought in a reclining chair for Paisley, positioning it between the twins' beds. The monitors continued their steady rhythm as night settled over the hospital, their soft beeping a reminder that two small hearts that hours ago had been sealed in coffins, were still fighting their way back to life. The private suite fell into midnight quiet, broken only by the sound of gentle breathing and the whisper of medical equipment. Elena dozed fitfully in her chair, while Gareth continued his vigil by the window, his silhouette stark against the city lights beyond. And Paisley sat between the twins, listening to their strengthening heartbeats, wondering what twist of fate had brought her to this moment. The morning sun filtered through the windows of St. Mercy Children's Hospital, casting long shadows across the quiet hallways. Elena gently touched Paisley's shoulder, motioning toward a private family waiting room down the corridor. Paisley followed, her borrowed scrubs rustling softly as she walked. The waiting room was a peaceful sanctuary away from the constant beeping of monitors and hushed medical discussions. Comfortable couches lined the walls, and a small coffee maker burbled in the corner. Elena closed the door behind them, then turned to face Paisley with eyes full of emotion. "You said you remembered me," Elena began softly. "From before?" Paisley nodded, sinking into one of the couches. "I never forgot. How could I? You saved my life." Elena sat beside her, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Tell me everything, Paisley. Please, I need to understand." Taking a deep breath, Paisley began her story. "I grew up in the foster system. Different homes, different families, never staying anywhere too long. But the one constant was I could always hear heartbeats, faint ones especially, the ones other people missed." She paused, looking down at her hands. "Most folks thought I was making it up, or crazy, but I could hear them. Babies in distress, elderly people having silent heart attacks, animals trapped in walls. It wasn't always easy, carrying that responsibility." "That's how you knew about the twins," Elena whispered. Paisley nodded. "I was passing by the cemetery when I heard them. Two tiny heartbeats, so faint they were almost gone. I couldn't just walk away." Elena reached over and squeezed Paisley's hand. "What happened after that day at the shelter, when we met?" A small smile touched Paisley's lips, despite the tears gathering in her eyes. "I was 16, living on the streets after running from my last foster home. I hadn't eaten in days. You were volunteering at the shelter's medical clinic." "You were so thin," Elena remembered, her voice catching. "So afraid. I had an infected cut on my arm. Most of the volunteers just handed out bandages and moved on. But you—" Paisley's voice grew thick with emotion. "You sat with me, cleaned the wound properly, asked me about my dreams, told me I mattered." "I wanted to help more," Elena said. "I looked for you the next week, but you were gone. The system caught up with me," Paisley explained. "Moved me to another city. But I never forgot what you said to me that day, that God doesn't make mistakes, and that my gift was meant to help others. During the darkest nights, those words kept me going." The door opened suddenly, and Gareth entered. His face was tight with tension as he looked between the two women. "The doctors want to discuss the latest test results," he said stiffly. "But first, I need some answers." He remained standing, arms crossed, studying Paisley with barely concealed suspicion. "How did you really know about my children? Who told you they were there?" "Nobody told me," Paisley said quietly. "I heard them." "That's impossible," Gareth snapped. "They were clinically dead." "Gareth," Elena interjected, "please sit. Listen." He remained standing but fell silent as Paisley explained again about her gift, her voice steady despite his skepticism. Elena added her own testimony about their previous meeting, describing Paisley's uncanny ability to detect medical issues others had missed at the shelter. "I know it sounds unbelievable," Paisley finished, "but I've had this ability since I was a child. I don't understand it. I just know when I hear a heartbeat in trouble, I have to help." Before Gareth could respond, Dr. Chen knocked and entered with a thick file in her hands. "Mr. and Mrs. Langford, we have the detailed toxicology results." The doctor's expression was grave as she spread several papers on the coffee table. "The compound we found wasn't administered in a single dose. The blood work shows a pattern of gradual exposure over several weeks, carefully calculated to build up to near fatal levels." Elena's hand flew to her mouth. "Weeks? But how?" "It would have required regular access to the children's food or drink." Dr. Chen explained. "The timing suggests someone very familiar with their daily routine." Gareth's face darkened with rage. "Someone close to us did this deliberately?" "The police will want to investigate everyone who had regular contact with the children," Dr. Chen confirmed. "But right now, we're still working to flush the remaining toxin from their systems. Their response to Ms. Thompson's presence remains remarkable. Their vital signs strengthen noticeably when she's nearby." Elena turned to Gareth, her eyes pleading. "They need her here, at least until we understand more about their condition." Gareth ran a hand through his hair, conflict evident on his face. After a long moment, he gave a sharp nod. "Fine, but I want security outside their door at all times, and background checks on everyone who enters that room." Through the waiting room's window, Victor Langford stood in the hallway, his knuckles white around his coffee cup as he watched the scene unfold. His face darkened as he saw Gareth's nod of acceptance, and he turned abruptly away, leaving his untouched coffee on a nearby shelf. Paisley felt a chill run down her spine as she caught his expression, but she pushed the feeling aside. The twins needed her, and for now, that was all that mattered. She followed Elena and Gareth back toward the children's room, the sound of those two precious heartbeats drawing her forward like a beacon in the storm. Dr. Chen gathered her papers, watching the group leave. "I'll have the nurse bring in a cot for Ms. Thompson," she said. "The next 48 hours will be crucial." The morning sun continued its path across the hospital floor, illuminating the busy hallway where life and death had danced so closely just hours before. In the private suite, the monitors beeped steadily, marking each precious heartbeat that Paisley had refused to let go silent. The evening sun cast long shadows through the hospital windows as Dr. Chen reviewed the twins' latest vital signs. "Their numbers are stable enough for supervised home care," she announced, looking up from her tablet. "But they'll need constant monitoring and immediate medical attention if anything changes." Elena's hand found Paisley's and squeezed it tight. "You'll come with us, won't you? You can sense things before the machines can." Paisley glanced down at her borrowed clothes, plain scrubs the hospital had provided to replace her ragged outfit. I don't want to impose. It's not an imposition," Elena insisted. "It's necessary." She turned to Gareth, who stood by the window with his arms crossed. "You know we need her." Gareth's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "The medical equipment is already being set up at home. If Paisley's ability can provide extra warning of any problems, it would be foolish to refuse." Within the hour, a small convoy of vehicles departed from St. Mercy's private entrance. Paisley sat in the back of a sleek black SUV, watching the city transform from medical complexes to towering luxury buildings. The twins, still unconscious, travelled separately in a fully equipped medical transport. The Langford residence occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming high-rise. Paisley's heart raced as they entered through a private underground garage, then rode a dedicated elevator that opened directly into a marble-floored foyer. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow reflections across pristine white walls adorned with original artwork. "This way," Elena said softly, guiding Paisley past what looked like a formal living room larger than any apartment she'd ever lived in. "The children's suite is on the 2nd level." They followed a curved staircase upward. Paisley tried not to stare at the clearly expensive everything, from the hand-carved banister to the plush carpeting that muffled their footsteps. The upper hallway stretched in both directions, lined with closed doors. "The twins' rooms are here," Elena explained, indicating a pair of connecting bedrooms that had been transformed into a medical suite. Equipment beeped steadily as nurses settled Noah and Grace into their beds. "And this will be your room." She opened a door to reveal a guest bedroom that made Paisley's breath catch. A king-sized bed dominated the space, dressed in crisp white linens. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of the city lights beginning to twinkle in the dusk. "I've never—" Paisley's voice trailed off as she took in the private bathroom, the walk-in closet, the elegant furnishings that probably cost more than she'd earned in her entire life. "Miss Thompson." Gareth's voice made her turn. He stood in the doorway, his expression stern. "We need to establish some ground rules." Paisley nodded, clasping her hands together to keep them from shaking. "You'll have access to this room and the children's suite only. The rest of the residence is off-limits unless specifically invited. Security cameras monitor all common areas. If you need anything, tell Elena or the staff. Don't wander. Is that clear?" "Yes, sir," Paisley said quietly. "I understand." "Furthermore," a cold voice interrupted, "we'll be watching every move you make." Victor Langford stepped into view, his expensive suit somehow making him look more threatening rather than refined. "I don't know what game you're playing," he continued, "but if this is some kind of Victor!" Elena's voice cracked like a whip. "Paisley saved our children's lives." "Did she?" Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Or did she somehow orchestrate this whole situation? A convenient rescue, and now she's wormed her way into your home, your trust." "That's enough," Gareth cut in, though Paisley noticed he didn't exactly defend her. "The security measures are in place. Let's focus on the children's recovery." Victor's lips pressed into a thin line, but he stepped back with a slight bow that seemed more mockery than respect. "Of course, I'm only thinking of the family's safety." He turned on his heel and strode away, footsteps echoing on the marble floor below. Elena touched Paisley's arm gently. "Don't mind him. You're safe here." But Paisley wasn't worried about her own safety. The barely concealed hostility in Victor's eyes had sent warning signals through her entire body. Something about him felt wrong, in a way she couldn't explain. A nurse appeared in the doorway. "Mrs. Langford, we're ready to do the evening check on the children." "I'll be right there." Elena gave Paisley's hand another squeeze. "Try to get some rest. There are fresh clothes in the closet. I had someone pick up some basics in your size. We'll get you anything else you need tomorrow." Soon Paisley found herself alone in the luxurious room, still struggling to process how much her life had changed in a single day. She changed into soft pajamas that still had price tags attached, then slipped out to check on the twins one last time before bed. The night nurses had dimmed the lights in the medical suite, leaving only the soft glow of monitoring equipment. Paisley stood between the two beds, listening to the quiet sounds of Noah and Grace breathing. Their heartbeats were stronger now, but still not quite right, like music slightly out of tune. As she turned to leave, something made her pause in the darkened hallway. There was another sound, so faint she might have imagined it, like the echo of a heartbeat, but muffled, as if coming through walls. Paisley pressed her hand against the cool surface, trying to track the strange sensation. But before she could identify its source, footsteps approached from the stairwell. She quickly retreated to her room, closing the door softly behind her. Outside her window, the city lights blurred into a tapestry of gold and shadow, while somewhere in the vast penthouse, that odd echo continued to pull at her senses. A warning she couldn't yet understand. Paisley jolted awake at 2 o'clock in the morning, her heart racing. Something was wrong. The sensation tugged at her consciousness like an invisible thread, pulling her from the depths of sleep. Grace's heartbeat had changed. The rhythm was off, barely perceptible but unmistakable to Paisley's gifted senses. She didn't pause to put on slippers or a robe. The plush carpet muffled her bare feet as she hurried down the dim hallway to the children's medical suite. The monitoring equipment glowed with reassuring green numbers, showing normal vital signs. But Paisley knew better. Grace lay still in her bed, her small chest rising and falling in shallow, irregular breaths. Though the machines registered nothing unusual, Paisley could feel the disruption in the little girl's heartbeat, like a song falling out of rhythm. "Grace?" Paisley touched her hand gently. The skin felt cool and clammy. "Someone help!" she called out, pressing the nurse call button repeatedly. "Something's wrong with Grace." The night nurse appeared within seconds, looking concerned but skeptical as she checked the monitors. "All readings are normal, Miss Thompson." "No, listen to me. She's having some kind of seizure. I can feel it. Please, get help now." The urgency in Paisley's voice must have carried weight, because the nurse pressed her emergency pager. Within minutes, the room filled with medical staff and a disheveled Gareth Langford, who had clearly rushed from bed. "What's happening?" he demanded, his voice rough with sleep and worry. "Miss Thompson claims Grace is having a seizure, but the monitors show—" the nurse began. "She is," Paisley insisted. "Please, you have to do something before it gets worse." As if to confirm her words, Grace's body suddenly went rigid, her breathing becoming more labored. The monitors finally began to sound their alarms, catching up to what Paisley had sensed minutes before. The medical team sprang into action, administering medication while Gareth watched helplessly from the doorway. His face had gone pale, and Paisley saw his hands trembling as he gripped the door frame. When the crisis passed and Grace stabilized, the doctor confirmed what Paisley had known. It was indeed a seizure, a subtle one that our equipment initially missed. If we hadn't caught it when we did. He left the sentence unfinished, but his meaning was clear. Gareth turned to Paisley, really looking at her for the first time since she'd arrived. Gone was the suspicion in his eyes, replaced by something like wonder and gratitude. "You knew," he said softly. "You actually knew before any of the machines." Paisley nodded, suddenly self-conscious under his intense gaze. I've always been able to sense these things. I can't explain it." "You don't have to explain it," he replied. "You saved my daughter. Again." The rest of the night passed in tense vigilance, but both twins remained stable. As dawn broke, Elena insisted on having breakfast brought to the children's suite so they could all eat together. The twins were tired but alert, their faces lighting up when Paisley entered the room. "Will you sit by me?" Grace asked, patting the edge of her bed. Her voice was weak but eager. "No, sit here," Noah called from his bed, not wanting to be left out. Paisley looked uncertainly at Elena, who nodded encouragingly. "There's plenty of room for all of us," she said, helping the nurse arrange trays of food. Paisley settled between the two beds, touched by the children's immediate acceptance of her. As they ate their breakfast of pancakes and fresh fruit, Grace reached for Paisley's hand. "Daddy says you knew I was sick last night before anyone else did." "That's right," Paisley replied softly. "I heard your heart needed help." "Like a superhero?" Noah asked, his eyes wide. Paisley laughed gently. "Not exactly. More like someone who's good at listening." "An angel," Grace declared, with the certainty only a 7-year-old could muster. "Mommy says angels watch over us when we sleep." From the doorway came a scoff that made them all look up. Victor Langford stood there, impeccably dressed despite the early hour. His cold gaze settled on Paisley like frost. "Angels? Really, Elena? Aren't we carrying this a bit far?" Elena's spine straightened. "Victor, if you've come to upset the children—" "I've come to check on my cousin's children," he corrected smoothly. Surely that's not forbidden. But his eyes never left Paisley, calculating and sharp. The twins shifted uneasily in their beds, the peaceful morning atmosphere shattered. Paisley felt Grace's grip on her hand tighten. "Perhaps this isn't the best time," Gareth said firmly, stepping between Victor and the beds. "The children need rest." Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course, we wouldn't want to interfere with their recovery." He turned to leave but paused. "Oh, and Gareth, the board expects you at this afternoon's meeting. We have some urgent matters to discuss." The day passed in a gentle rhythm of medication schedules, brief physical therapy sessions, and quiet games with the twins. Paisley found herself drawn into their world of stuffed animals and favorite stories, touched by their resilience even as she worried about their fragility. As evening fell, the children drifted off to sleep, exhausted but peaceful. Paisley did one final check of their heartbeats before heading to her own room. Both rhythms were stronger than the day before, slowly finding their natural patterns again. She was about to enter her bedroom when voices drifted up from the staff quarters below, hushed but distinct in the quiet house. "Can't wait much longer," someone whispered urgently. "The plan has to move forward." "Patience," another voice replied. "These things take time. The matter will be finished soon enough." Paisley froze, her hand on the doorknob. The voices were too low to identify, but the secretive tone sent chills down her spine. She stood perfectly still, straining to hear more, but the voices faded into silence, leaving her with nothing but questions and a growing sense of danger. Morning light filtered through the penthouse windows as Gareth Langford sat at his desk, his face growing darker with each page he turned. The latest hospital reports lay spread before him, each one telling a story that made his stomach twist. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered, running a hand through his graying hair. "The toxin levels, they're decreasing, but not naturally." He grabbed his phone, punching in numbers with trembling fingers. "Get me Dr. Reynolds, now." While he waited, his eyes scanned the numbers again. The doctor's voice, when it came through, only confirmed his fears. "Mr. Langford, you're correct. These patterns suggest repeated exposure over time. Someone had to be administering the poison regularly, likely small doses to avoid detection. Gareth's free hand clenched into a fist. So you're telling me this wasn't a one-time event? Someone has been deliberately poisoning my children? I'm afraid that's what the evidence suggests, yes. After ending the call, Gareth immediately summoned his head of security. Within an hour, the penthouse was buzzing with tension as security personnel began interviewing staff members. Maids clutched their cleaning supplies nervously, kitchen staff whispered among themselves, and even the normally unflappable butler seemed on edge. Elena found Paisley in the twins' room, where she'd been reading to them. "Paisley, we need to get you some proper clothes," she said softly. "Would you come shopping with me?" Paisley glanced down at her borrowed outfit, still ill-fitting and showing signs of wear. "Oh, you don't have to. I want to," Elena insisted, her warm brown eyes gentle but determined. "Please." The luxury department store felt like another world to Paisley. She trailed behind Elena, touching fabrics hesitantly, checking price tags and wincing at numbers that made her head spin. When Elena started selecting items and piling them into a cart, Paisley's protests grew stronger. "Mrs. Langford, this is too much. I can't—" "Elena," the older woman corrected. "And yes, you can. Paisley, you saved my children's lives. Let me do this small thing for you." In the dressing room, Paisley's hands shook as she tried on a soft sweater that probably cost more than she'd ever spent on clothes in a month. She caught her reflection in the mirror, a young black woman looking lost among designer labels, her eyes wide with disbelief. "How does it fit?" Elena called from outside. "It's beautiful," Paisley admitted, her voice catching. Elena poked her head in, smiling. "There are tears in your eyes. I'm not used to kindness like this." Elena stepped fully into the dressing room, taking Paisley's hands in hers. "When you were 16, you were volunteering at that youth center where I worked. Do you remember what you told me then?" Paisley nodded, the memory clear despite the years between. "I said I wished I could disappear because nobody saw me anyway. And I told you that God sees you, even when others don't. That you matter." Elena squeezed her hands. "You still matter, Paisley. You've always mattered." By the time they returned to the penthouse, Paisley had a complete wardrobe. Simple but elegant pieces that made her look like she belonged in the Langfords' world, even if she didn't feel like it yet. But the peaceful mood from their shopping trip evaporated when they found Gareth in his study, his face grim. "The security footage," he said without preamble. "From the weeks when the twins first started showing symptoms, it's gone. Completely wiped." Elena sank into a chair. "How is that possible?" "Someone with access to our security systems," Gareth replied. "Someone who knew exactly what they were doing." Paisley thought of the whispered conversation she'd overheard the night before, but wasn't sure if she should mention it. Before she could decide, a small voice called from the hallway. "Paisley, can you help us?" It was Grace with Noah right behind her. They had somehow convinced their nurse to let them out of bed for a short while, and were clutching boxes of art supplies. "We want to make our room pretty," Noah explained. "Since we're getting better now." The simple optimism in his voice made all three adults exchange glances. Then Elena smiled, pushing aside her worry for the moment. "That sounds like a wonderful idea." Soon the children's suite was transformed into a creative workshop. Paisley helped the twins cut out paper stars while Elena strung them together. Even Gareth joined in, carefully taping their artwork to the walls where the twins directed him. "Look, Daddy!" Grace held up a drawing of what appeared to be 6 people. "That's you and Mommy, and Noah and me, and Paisley, and even Uncle Victor." Paisley noticed how the figure representing Victor was drawn slightly apart from the others, but she kept that observation to herself. The twins' laughter filled the room as they continued decorating, their joy infectious enough to temporarily push back the shadows of concern. The peaceful moment shattered at the distinctive ding of the elevator. Victor Langford stepped out, his polished appearance at odds with the cheerful chaos of the children's artwork. His eyes narrowed as he took in the scene, lingering especially on Paisley, who was helping Grace hang another string of stars. "How domestic," he said, his voice dripping with barely concealed disdain. "Though perhaps we should focus more on security concerns than arts and crafts." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Paisley felt Grace press against her side, while Noah moved closer to his father. The paper stars swayed gently in the air conditioning, casting shifting shadows on the walls that suddenly seemed less magical and more ominous. Victor's presence filled the doorway like a storm cloud, his carefully controlled expression doing nothing to hide the threat in his eyes as he stared at Paisley. She met his gaze steadily, even as she felt Grace's small hand slip into hers, seeking comfort. The afternoon sun streamed through the penthouse windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors as Dr. James Chen, one of the city's leading neurologists, observed the twins with careful attention. His presence had been requested by Gareth, who stood nearby with his arms crossed, watching every movement and reaction. "Now, Paisley," Dr. Chen said, "could you step out of the room for a few minutes?" Paisley nodded and quietly left the children's suite. Almost immediately, the monitors tracking Noah and Grace's vital signs showed subtle changes. Their heart rates increased slightly, and their brain activity patterns shifted. "Fascinating," Dr. Chen murmured, making notes on his tablet. "Paisley, please return." When she stepped back in, both children visibly relaxed. Noah, who had been fidgeting, settled back against his pillows with a content sigh. Grace's fingers uncurled from their tight grip on her blanket. "The readings are normalizing," one of the nurses confirmed, pointing to the monitors. Dr. Chen shook his head in amazement. "In 30 years of practice, I've never seen anything quite like this. There's no scientific explanation I can offer for how your presence affects them, Miss Thompson." "But you confirm there is an effect?" Gareth pressed, his voice tense. "Undeniably." Dr. Chen adjusted his glasses. "The children show markedly increased stability when she's near. Their vital signs are stronger, more consistent. Their neurological responses are more robust." Elena, who had been quiet throughout the examination, reached for Paisley's hand and squeezed it. The gesture didn't go unnoticed by Gareth, whose expression softened slightly. The moment was interrupted by Victor's arrival. He strode in wearing an expensive suit, his manner radiating authority. "Gareth, we need to discuss some urgent company matters." "Not now, Victor," Gareth replied, not taking his eyes off his children. "It's critical. The board is concerned about your emotional state affecting decision-making." Victor's voice carried a note of false sympathy. "They're suggesting you take a temporary leave of absence. Let me handle things until this situation stabilizes." Gareth turned sharply. "My emotional state?" "You've been through a terrible ordeal." Victor continued smoothly. "The board feels—" "The board." Gareth's eyes narrowed. "Or you, Victor." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Dr. Chen cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should continue our evaluation later." "No," Gareth said firmly. "You're here for my children. Victor, we'll discuss this another time." Victor's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly and left. The tension in his departure lingered like a bad taste in the air. Throughout the afternoon, Paisley sat with the twins, reading them stories from a pile of well-loved books. Noah was especially engaged, his eyes bright as she did different voices for each character. Suddenly, Paisley's hand froze mid-page turn. "Noah," she said quietly, setting the book aside. "I'm okay," he insisted, but Paisley was already reaching for the nurse call button. "His heartbeat's getting uneven," she explained as medical staff rushed in. The monitors hadn't registered any change yet, but within minutes, Noah's vital signs began to dip. Thanks to Paisley's early warning, the medical team was able to stabilize him quickly. Elena watched this scene unfold from the doorway, her heart aching with a complex mixture of gratitude and regret. She remembered Paisley as a teenager, bright, caring, but so lost. Now here she was, protecting Elena's children with the same gentle determination she'd shown all those years ago. "You should have been mine," Elena whispered when Paisley passed her later in the hallway. "I should have fought harder to keep you in the program, to give you a real home." Paisley stopped, stunned by the raw emotion in Elena's voice. "You did more than anyone else ever tried to," she said softly. "You saw me when no one else did." Evening settled over the city, painting the sky in deep purples and blues, visible through the penthouse's floor-to-ceiling windows. The family gathered for dinner in the formal dining room, Gareth at the head of the table, Elena to his right, the twins carefully propped up in special chairs with their nurses hovering nearby, and Paisley seated at the far end, still unsure of her place in this tableau. The meal was quiet, punctuated only by the gentle clink of silverware and soft conversation. Noah asked Paisley to cut his chicken into smaller pieces, while Grace insisted on having her water in the same kind of glass Paisley was using, small moments of normalcy that felt precious after how close they'd come to losing everything. What none of them could see was the figure in the security monitoring room 17 floors below, watching their dinner through the camera feed. Multiple screens showed different angles of the penthouse, and a gloved hand reached out to adjust one of the views, zooming in on Paisley's face with disturbing intensity. The twins were finally starting to show real improvement. Dr. Chen's evaluation had confirmed Paisley's inexplicable but undeniable impact, and Elena was healing old wounds by protecting Paisley as she wished she had years ago. Yet beneath this veneer of progress, threatening currents were stirring, in Victor's machinations, in the unknown observer's surveillance, in the mysteries still surrounding the twins' poisoning. The family continued their quiet dinner, unaware they were being watched, while outside the warmth of their circle, shadows gathered and plans unfolded in the darkness. Morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Langford penthouse, casting warm, golden rectangles across the polished marble floors. The light seemed to mirror the brightening mood within, as Noah and Grace experienced their strongest day since their miraculous awakening. "Paisley, Paisley!" Grace called out, her voice stronger than it had been in weeks. She sat cross-legged on a plush rug in the children's playroom, surrounded by colored pencils and paper. "Come see what I drew." Paisley hurried over, kneeling beside the little girl. Her heart swelled as Grace proudly held up her artwork, a crayon drawing of a figure with dark skin and enormous rainbow-colored wings spreading across the page. "That's you," Grace explained, pointing with a small finger. "Because you're our guardian angel." Noah looked up from his own drawing. "I'm making one too, but my wings are blue because that's the best color." Paisley's throat tightened with emotion. "These are beautiful," she managed to say, touching the paper gently. "Should we hang them up?" "Yes," both twins exclaimed in unison. From the doorway, Elena watched the scene unfold, tears glistening in her eyes. The transformation in her children over the past few days had been nothing short of miraculous. Their color had returned, their energy was building, and most importantly, their spirits were healing. "Mama, look." Grace held up her drawing, It's Paisley protecting us. Elena stepped into the room, wrapping an arm around Paisley's shoulders. It's perfect, mi amor, and so true. The morning flowed into a series of simple but precious moments. The twins convinced Paisley to join them in a board game, their laughter echoing through the typically austere penthouse as they played Candyland. Noah insisted on being the blue piece, while Grace carefully moved her red marker along the rainbow path. "You've landed on licorice?" Noah giggled as Paisley drew a card that sent her backward. "You have to go all the way back." Paisley clutched her chest in mock despair. "Oh no, not the licorice!" Their joy was infectious, drawing smiles from even the most serious security personnel stationed throughout the penthouse. The nurses who had been so concerned about the twins' vital signs now found themselves checking the monitors less frequently, reassured by the children's obvious improvement. At lunchtime, the twins wouldn't hear of Paisley sitting anywhere but between them at the table. They'd arranged their chairs close together, creating a tight little cluster of togetherness. "Here," Grace said, patting the seat beside her. "You have to sit with us." "Yeah," Noah added. "You make the sandwiches taste better." Paisley caught Elena's eye across the table, and they shared a warm smile. This simple acceptance, this uncomplicated love from the children, was healing something deep inside Paisley, a wound she'd carried since her own childhood in the foster system. Gareth appeared in the doorway, looking exhausted, but somehow lighter than he had in days. Dark circles still ringed his eyes, evidence of sleepless nights spent worrying about his children and his company. But today, watching his family, including Paisley, gathered around the table, something in him seemed to crack open. He cleared his throat. "Paisley, could I speak with you for a moment?" She followed him into his study, heart beating faster despite the gentler tone he'd been using with her lately. The room was lined with dark wood panels and leather-bound books, everything speaking of power and privilege. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly, surprising her. "And my deepest gratitude. When you first appeared at the funeral—" He paused, emotions playing across his usually controlled face. "I thought you were either crazy or cruel, giving us false hope. But you've saved my children. You've saved our family. I don't understand how you do what you do, but I know now that you were sent to us when we needed you most." Paisley's eyes filled with tears. I couldn't ignore what I was feeling. I had to try." "Thank God you did." His voice cracked slightly. "Thank God you were brave enough to look crazy, to risk everything, to make us listen." When they returned to the dining room, Elena was helping the twins with their soup and sandwiches. She looked up, seeing the emotion on both their faces, and smiled knowingly. "Paisley," Elena said softly, "I've been thinking about what happened at the hospital, when you reminded me of our first meeting. I believe with all my heart that God sent you back to us, not just for the twins, but to make our family whole." Paisley sat down heavily, overwhelmed by the acceptance and love surrounding her. For the first time in her life, she felt truly wanted. Not tolerated, not temporarily useful, but genuinely welcomed and valued. The day seemed to float by in a haze of simple pleasures and healing moments. The twins grew stronger by the hour, their natural childhood resilience helping them bounce back from their ordeal. They played games, read stories, and filled page after page with colorful drawings, many featuring their dark-skinned angel with rainbow wings. As evening approached, Elena arranged for a special dinner to celebrate the twins' improvement. The long dining table was set with the family's best china, crystal glasses catching the light of the setting sun. Staff members were invited to join them, creating a warm, festive atmosphere that felt more like a family gathering than a formal meal in a billionaire's penthouse. Laughter filled the room, real, genuine laughter that seemed to wash away the lingering shadows of fear and grief. Noah told silly jokes from his favorite joke book, while Grace insisted on saying grace herself, thanking God specifically for sending Paisley to save us. The chef had prepared all the twins' favorite foods, and for the first time since their illness began, they ate with real appetite. Even Gareth relaxed enough to join in the general merriment, sharing funny stories about the twins as babies that had everyone clutching their sides with laughter. After dinner, Paisley helped tuck the twins into bed, their eyelids heavy with healthy tiredness rather than illness. They insisted on one more story, then one more hug, then one more kiss goodnight. Stay forever, Grace mumbled as she drifted off to sleep. Please don't go away. Noah added, his voice already fuzzy with approaching dreams. Paisley's heart felt so full it might burst as she walked back to her room. The peace she felt was unlike anything she'd experienced before. Here, in this unlikely place, she had found what she'd been searching for her entire life: belonging, purpose, love. Several floors below, in his private study, Victor Langford sat in the dark, illuminated only by the blue glow of his computer screen. His fingers moved across the keyboard with precise determination as he orchestrated his plan. Multiple windows were open. Emails to board members, document drafts, surveillance photos of Paisley entering and leaving the penthouse. He paused, taking a sip of expensive scotch, his face hard with calculated hatred. The interloper who had ruined his carefully laid plans would have to be dealt with. And Victor Langford was very, very good at dealing with problems. The peaceful morning silence in the Langford penthouse shattered at 6:15 a.m. when heavy boots thundered down the marble hallway. Paisley jolted awake to the sound of voices shouting, "Police! Search warrant!" followed by the crash of her bedroom door flying open. "Hands where we can see them!" Officer Henry Dalton commanded, his flashlight beam cutting through the dim room. Paisley's heart hammered as she raised her trembling hands, still tangled in her blankets. 3 officers swarmed into her small guest room, their movements precise and practiced. The sudden invasion felt like a nightmare, but the cold metal of handcuffs clicking around her wrists proved it was terrifyingly real. "What's happening?" she gasped, her voice small and frightened. "We have a warrant to search these premises," Officer Dalton stated firmly, showing her the document. "Please remain seated on the bed while we conduct our search." Paisley watched in horror as the officers methodically went through her few belongings. Her old backpack, the one containing everything she owned from her life on the streets, was dumped onto a table. One officer carefully documented each item with photographs, while another sorted through the contents. "Sir," called one of the officers. "Found something." He held up a small glass vial filled with clear liquid, carefully extracting it from a side pocket of Paisley's backpack using gloved hands. Paisley stared at it in confusion. She had never seen it before in her life. "That's not mine," she whispered, panic rising in her throat. "I don't know what that is." The commotion had awakened the rest of the household. Elena appeared in the doorway in her robe, her face draining of color as she took in the scene. "Paisley, what's going on?" Before anyone could answer, Victor Langford strode into the room, impeccably dressed despite the early hour. His face wore an expression of grim satisfaction as he surveyed the scene. "I knew it," he declared, his voice carrying an edge of triumph. "I've suspected her from the beginning. The timing of her appearance was far too convenient." Gareth appeared behind his wife, his expression stormy. "Victor, what is the meaning of this?" "The meaning, cousin, is that I've been conducting my own investigation." Victor pulled out a tablet and began displaying documents. "These are lab results showing the exact compound found in the twins' blood work, matching what was just discovered in her possession. And here," he swiped to show security footage of Paisley in the hospital, standing near the twins' IV poles during the night. Paisley's blood ran cold as she recognized the footage. But something was wrong. The timestamps were from times she knew she'd been sleeping, and the angles seemed distorted. "That's not right," she protested. "Those videos have been changed." The twins' voices suddenly pierced the tension as they appeared in the hallway, drawn by the noise. Their small faces crumpled in distress when they saw Paisley in handcuffs. "No!" Grace screamed, trying to run to Paisley but held back by Elena. "Don't hurt her! She's our angel!" Noah began to sob. "She didn't do anything bad! She saved us!" "Please," Paisley begged, looking at Gareth and Elena. "You know me. You know I would never hurt them. I love them." Gareth stood frozen, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. The evidence before him warred with his instincts, with everything he'd witnessed over the past days. Elena clutched the twins, tears streaming down her face as she looked helplessly between her husband and Paisley. "I'm sorry," Officer Dalton said, helping Paisley to her feet. "But we have to take you in for questioning. The evidence is substantial." As they led her towards the elevator, the twins broke free from Elena and ran after them, their small feet pattering on the marble floor. "Don't take her!" Noah cried. "Daddy, please don't let them take her." Grace reached for Paisley's hand, but an officer gently blocked her. "Paisley! Paisley, we need you!" The elevator doors closed on their desperate faces, and Paisley felt her heart breaking. As they descended, the building's security cameras captured her tears falling silently. They emerged into the wet morning, where a light rain had begun to fall. News vans were already gathering, tipped off about the arrest at the Langford penthouse. Camera flashes exploded as Paisley was led to the waiting police car, her bare feet cold on the wet pavement. Through the car's back window, Paisley could see the towering building where, just hours ago, she had finally found a home. As the police car pulled away, she closed her eyes, remembering the twins' screams. Up in the penthouse, the peaceful morning had devolved into chaos. The twins were inconsolable, their monitors beeping erratically as their vital signs began to fluctuate. Medical staff rushed to stabilize them, but without Paisley's presence, their conditions were already beginning to deteriorate. Elena pressed her hand against the window, watching the police car disappear into the rainy morning traffic. Behind her, the irregular beeping of the monitors played a frightening rhythm, while Victor stood in the corner, his face unreadable as he watched his plan unfold exactly as he'd intended. The rain fell harder, washing away Paisley's footprints from the sidewalk below, while inside the penthouse, the twins' cries echoed through the halls, calling for their angel who could no longer hear them. The holding cell was barely 8 feet by 10 feet, with stark concrete walls and a single narrow window set high near the ceiling. Paisley sat on the thin mattress, her borrowed clothes from Elena now wrinkled from the rough handling during her arrest. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to ward off both the physical cold and the crushing weight of separation from the twins. "Dear God," she whispered, her breath visible in the chilly air. "Please keep Noah and Grace safe. Please don't let them suffer because I'm not there." Her voice cracked on the last words. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows that made the cell feel even more oppressive. Paisley could still hear the twins' screams echoing in her memory, their small hands reaching for her as the police led her away. The thought of them in distress made her chest ache. Back at the Langford penthouse, Elena paced in Gareth's home office, her hands trembling as she spread out the documents Victor had presented. Something about them felt wrong, but she couldn't put her finger on what. "These timestamps," she muttered, comparing 2 security footage stills. "The lighting is different, but it's supposed to be the same time of night." She pulled out her reading glasses, leaning closer to study the details. Gareth burst into the office, his face ashen. Noah's oxygen levels just dropped again. The machines didn't catch it until he was already struggling. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. If Paisley had been here, she would have known before it happened. Elena finished softly, just like she always did. The guilt in Gareth's eyes was painful to witness. What if we made a terrible mistake? The twins haven't stopped crying since they took her. From down the hall, Grace's voice carried clearly. I want Paisley. Please get Paisley. Elena's heart clenched at the raw desperation in her daughter's voice. She turned back to the documents with renewed determination. These lab results Victor showed us. Look at the letterhead. It's from the hospital's main branch, but the twins were only treated at the children's facility. Gareth leaned over her shoulder, frowning. And these security badges? He pointed to a detail in one of the footage stills. The color coding is wrong for that department. I remember because we just updated the system last quarter. Someone altered these, Elena said, her voice hardening. And I think I know who. In the children's suite, Noah lay curled on his side, his monitoring equipment beeping steadily, but his face twisted in distress. The nurse adjusted his oxygen mask, making gentle shushing sounds. My heart feels funny, he whimpered. Paisley always knew when it felt funny. Grace reached across from her bed, stretching to hold her twin's hand. I can feel it too. We need her back. The nurse checked the machines again, but they showed nothing unusual. Yet the twins' instincts, so attuned to Paisley's gift, told them something wasn't right. Elena spent hours combing through records, her determination growing with each inconsistency she found. Around 11 o'clock that night, she convinced the head of security to let her review their backup archives. Victor said these were all corrupted. The security chief explained, leading her to a small room filled with servers. But we always keep offline backups. Elena's hands flew over the keyboard, pulling up file after file. And there it was, the original security footage from the weeks leading up to the twins' collapse, with unaltered timestamps intact. Look at this, she breathed, pausing the footage. The screen showed Victor entering the children's wing late at night, something he'd claimed he never did. The timestamp matched perfectly with the dates of the first poison traces in the twins' blood work. In her cold cell, Paisley huddled on the mattress, her eyes closed in prayer. She could feel it, even through the miles, separating them. The twins' distress calling to her like a distant echo. Their heartbeats fluttered in her consciousness, weak but present, reminding her that the bond they shared transcended physical distance. Hold on, she whispered into the darkness. Just hold on. The truth will come out. And in that moment, as Elena stared at the damning evidence on the security monitor, the first pieces of Victor's carefully constructed lie began to crumble. The night deepened, but Elena didn't stop working. She printed everything she found, creating duplicate copies and sending them to secure locations. The original date stamps told a story so different from Victor's version that her hands shook as she compiled the evidence. In the children's suite, the twins finally fell into an uneasy sleep, their hands still clasped between their beds. The monitors beeped steadily, but they missed the subtle changes that Paisley would have caught, the slight variations in rhythm, the tiny fluctuations that could signal bigger problems ahead. Gareth stood in the doorway watching them, his shoulders heavy with the weight of doubt and regret. He thought of Paisley, alone in a cell, punished for a crime he was beginning to believe she never committed. The twins' unwavering faith in her innocence haunted him. Children, he knew, often saw truth more clearly than adults clouded by suspicion and prejudice. Elena appeared beside him, clutching a folder of documents. I found something, she whispered, careful not to wake the twins. We need to talk. Now. They retreated to the office, where Elena spread out her discoveries on the desk. The evidence of tampering was clear once you knew where to look. Victor's perfect case against Paisley was beginning to show its cracks. He claimed these archives were destroyed, Elena said, pointing to the timestamp that would change everything. But they weren't. They were just hidden, waiting for someone to look deeper. Gareth stared at the proof before him, his face hardening with anger. Not at Paisley this time, but at his own cousin's betrayal. We have to get her out of there. First thing in the morning, Elena agreed, gathering the documents carefully. And then Victor will have a lot of explaining to do. In her cell, Paisley finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, her prayers still on her lips. She didn't know that at that very moment, Elena was holding the key to her freedom, a simple timestamp that would begin to unravel everything Victor had worked so hard to hide. Dawn painted the Manhattan skyline in shades of purple and gold as Elena gathered her coat and purse. Her hands shook slightly as she checked the folder of evidence one last time, making sure everything was secure. I need to follow something, she told Gareth, who stood by the penthouse windows looking exhausted. A feeling in my gut that won't let go. Gareth turned, his face etched with worry lines. What kind of feeling? The kind that tells me there's more to find. She touched his arm gently. Trust me on this. Stay with the twins. They need you here. The early morning air felt crisp against her face as she hurried through the quiet streets. Her destination was a small apartment building in Queens, where Samuel Pierce, Sam to his friends, had lived since retiring from the Langford Estates security team 3 years ago. Elena's heels clicked against the worn steps as she climbed to the 3rd floor. She remembered Sam as a careful man, someone who always seemed to notice everything but said very little. The kind of person who might keep records just in case. When Sam opened his door, his eyes widened with recognition. Mrs. Langford? He was still in his morning robe, a coffee cup in his weathered hands. Is everything all right? I need your help, Sam. Elena's voice was steady despite her racing heart. Do you still have any of the old security footage from your time at the estate? Anything from about 6 months ago? Sam's expression shifted, becoming guarded. Mom, I'm not supposed to... Please. Elena interrupted softly. My children's lives might depend on it. He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Come in. I might have something. His apartment was small but meticulously organized, with photographs of his grandchildren on every surface. Sam disappeared into a back room and returned with an external hard drive. I always kept backups, he explained, turning the device over in his hands. Not official ones, mind you, just insurance, in case something ever felt wrong. He hesitated. There were times things didn't add up, but it wasn't my place to say. Elena's fingers trembled as she took the drive. Thank you, Sam. You have no idea how important this might be. She found a quiet cafe 3 blocks away, ordered a large coffee, and set up her laptop in a corner booth. The cafe was nearly empty, soft jazz playing overhead as she plugged in the hard drive. Hours of footage began to play across her screen. She fast-forwarded through days of ordinary activity until something caught her eye. Her breath caught in her throat. There was Victor, entering the children's wing at 2:15 in the morning, weeks before the twins first became ill. He moved with purpose, heading straight for their private kitchen. Elena leaned closer, her coffee growing cold and forgotten. The footage showed Victor carefully opening the refrigerator, removing the twins' special juice bottles, the ones their nutritionist had prepared. His back was to the camera as he worked, but when he turned, Elena could clearly see him tucking something into his jacket pocket, the empty vial. "Oh, God," she whispered, her hand covering her mouth. She watched as Victor repeated this pattern over several nights, always during the quietest hours, always when he thought no one was watching. The evidence was undeniable. Elena's hands shook so badly she could barely pack up her computer. The morning crowd was starting to fill the cafe as she rushed out, her mind racing. She had to get this to Gareth. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt endless. When the doors finally opened, she found Gareth in his office, on the phone with the twins' doctor. "I need you to see this," she said the moment he hung up. "Now." She played the footage for him, watching his face change as understanding dawned. Anger, horror, and grief played across his features as he watched his own cousin methodically poisoning his children. "Son of a..." Gareth's voice broke. He reached for his phone with shaking hands, dialing their lawyer. Events moved quickly after that. Their lawyer contacted the police, sending them the footage along with the other evidence they'd gathered. Within an hour, orders were being processed. One for Paisley's immediate release, another for Victor's arrest. Elena sat beside the twins, who were finally sleeping peacefully as she waited for news. Their monitors beeped steadily, but she knew they needed Paisley back. They all did. "We're bringing her home," she whispered, smoothing Grace's hair back from her forehead. "We're making this right." Across town, officers were already heading toward Paisley's cell with release papers, while another team mobilized to arrest Victor. The truth, hidden for so long in Sam's careful backups, was finally coming to light. The morning sun streamed through the penthouse windows, bright and clear, as justice began to turn its wheels. Elena watched the light play across her children's faces and said a silent prayer of thanks for old security guards who kept backups, for gut feelings that wouldn't let go, and for a young woman whose gift had saved them all. The fluorescent lights of the city jail cast harsh shadows across Elena's face as she waited in the processing area, her fingers drumming anxiously against her purse. Every second felt like an eternity as paperwork was processed and forms were signed. The clock on the wall ticked methodically, each movement a reminder of precious time slipping away. "Mrs. Langford?" A corrections officer appeared, keys jangling at his belt. "We're bringing Ms. Thompson out now." Elena stood quickly, her heart pounding. The heavy metal door buzzed and swung open, revealing Paisley, still wearing the clothes from her arrest, her shoulders hunched and dark circles under her eyes. She looked smaller somehow, more vulnerable than Elena remembered. "Paisley!" Elena rushed forward, wrapping her arms around the young woman before she could even fully step through the doorway. Paisley stiffened for a moment, then melted into the embrace, her body trembling. "I'm so sorry," Elena whispered fiercely, holding Paisley's face between her hands. "We know the truth now. We have proof it was Victor all along." Paisley's eyes filled with tears. "The twins, are they? They need you." Elena's voice cracked. "They're getting worse by the hour. We have to hurry." They rushed through the remaining release procedures, Elena's hand never leaving Paisley's arm, as if afraid she might disappear again. Outside, the morning sun was painfully bright after Paisley's days in the dim cell. Elena's car waited at the curb, engine running. As they sped toward St. Mercy Children's Hospital, Elena's phone rang through the car speakers. Gareth's voice filled the space, tight with barely controlled panic. "Where are you? Noah's heartbeat keeps dropping. The machines can barely track it anymore." There was a commotion in the background, medical terms being called out urgently. "Grace's oxygen saturation is at 85% and falling. The doctors—" His voice broke. "They don't know what else to try." Paisley leaned forward in her seat, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles went white. "Tell them to hang on," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I'm coming." Eleanor pressed harder on the accelerator, weaving through traffic with uncharacteristic aggression. Red lights turned green just as they approached, as if even the city itself understood their desperate rush. Paisley closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing, to prepare herself for what was coming. They squealed into the hospital parking lot 12 minutes later. Paisley was out of the car before it fully stopped, Elena right behind her. They ran through the sliding doors, past the security desk where the guard recognized them and quickly waved them through. The elevator seemed to crawl between floors. Paisley bounced on her toes, watching the numbers light up one by one. When the doors finally opened on the pediatric floor, they could hear the chaos before they saw it. Medical staff crowded the hallway outside the twins' room. Monitors beeped erratically. A doctor was calling for additional medication. Paisley didn't slow down. She moved through the crowd like water, nurses and technicians automatically stepping aside as if they sensed her urgency. Inside the room, Gareth stood between the two beds, his usual commanding presence reduced to helpless worry as he looked back and forth between his children. Both twins lay unnaturally still, their skin pale and slightly blue-tinged. The machine surrounding them flashed warning lights and numbers that kept dropping. But the moment Paisley crossed the threshold, something changed. Noah's fingers twitched. Grace's breathing, though still labored, fell into a slightly steadier rhythm. Paisley. Grace's voice was barely a whisper, but her eyes fluttered open. Paisley moved to Grace's bedside first, since her readings were the most critical. She knelt beside the bed, one hand settling gently on the little girl's back. Her touch was feather-light, but sure as she closed her eyes, listening beyond what the machines could detect. "I'm here, sweetheart," Paisley murmured, her voice warm and steady despite the tears tracking down her cheeks. "I can hear you. Keep fighting for me, okay? I'm not going anywhere, this time." The room fell silent except for the beeping monitors, everyone watching as Paisley concentrated. Her other hand reached out to find Noah's arm, creating a connection between all three of them. The twins' eyes were fixed on her face, trust and relief evident even through their exhaustion. "That's it," Paisley whispered, feeling Grace's heartbeat strengthen ever so slightly under her palm. "That's my brave girl. Just like that. Keep coming back to me." The monitors began to show small improvements, decimal points of change that nonetheless had the medical staff exchanging amazed looks. Paisley remained focused entirely on the children. Her world narrowed to the sound of their hearts, the rhythm of their breathing, the fight happening beneath their skin. Elena and Gareth stood close together, watching this miracle unfold for what felt like the 100th time, yet it never ceased to amaze them. Their children, who had been slipping away just minutes before, were slowly but surely stabilizing under Paisley's gentle touch. Paisley continued to kneel there, one hand on Grace's back, the other holding Noah's arm, whispering words of encouragement and love as she listened intently to the faint but precious sounds of their hearts beating on. Paisley closed her eyes, blocking out the chaos around her. The beeping monitors, the worried whispers of doctors, even Gareth and Elena's anxious breathing. She pushed it all away until there was only silence. In that quiet space, she searched for what the machines couldn't detect. There, the faintest flutter, like a butterfly's wing against her palm where it rested on Grace's back. So fragile, but fighting. "Her heart rate is dropping again," a doctor announced, reaching for medication. "Wait," Paisley said firmly, not opening her eyes. "She's actually getting stronger, but it's too subtle for the monitors. The medication you're about to give her, it'll be too much right now." The doctor hesitated, looking at Gareth for guidance. After a moment's internal struggle, Gareth nodded. "Listen to her." Paisley kept one hand on Grace while reaching for Noah with the other. "The poison damaged their heart's natural rhythm," she explained softly. "They're trying to find it again, but the medicine is making it harder. They need gentler support right now." She turned her head toward the medical team. Do you have any beta blockers meant for pediatric patients? Something very mild? A nurse quickly checked their supplies and nodded. Try 1/4 of the normal dose, Paisley suggested. Grace first. Her heart is speaking to me. It wants to stabilize but needs help remembering how. The doctor gave instructions, and the nurse carefully measured out the medication. Within minutes of administering it, Grace's monitors showed the first real improvement in days. Now Noah, Paisley said. His rhythm is different, slower but steadier. He needs half of what you gave Grace. Across town, a very different scene was unfolding. Victor Langford stood in his private office, hastily shoving documents into a briefcase when his door burst open. Police officers filled the doorway, weapons drawn. Victor Langford, you're under arrest, the lead officer announced. Victor's eyes darted to a service door hidden behind an expensive painting. He lunged for it, but officers had already covered that escape route. As they handcuffed him, the charges echoed through the marble halls of the building he'd tried so desperately to control. Attempted murder, fraud, evidence tampering. Back in the hospital room, Paisley continued her gentle work. Hour after hour, she guided the medical team, translating what she heard in the twins' heartbeats into adjustments they could make. Grace's color slowly improved. Noah's breathing deepened and steadied. Talk to them, Paisley encouraged Elena and Gareth. They can hear you. It helps their hearts remember who they're fighting for. Elena didn't hesitate, moving to Noah's side while Gareth approached Grace. They spoke softly of home, of favorite books and games, of all the love waiting for them. As afternoon faded into evening, both children showed consistent improvement. Grace managed to eat a few spoonfuls of broth. Noah squeezed his father's hand and held on. Gareth watched it all with growing amazement. When Grace smiled weakly at a story Elena was telling, he couldn't hold back anymore. The mighty CEO of Langford Industries sank into a chair, buried his face in his hands, and wept. I'm sorry, he choked out, looking up at Paisley. I'm so sorry I ever doubted you. You've saved them. Again and again, you've saved them. Paisley, still holding Noah's hand, gave him a tired smile. They saved me too, she said simply. They gave me somewhere to belong. As night settled over the hospital, both children drifted into peaceful sleep for the first time since their ordeal began. Their monitors showed strong, steady rhythms. The constant parade of worried doctors slowed to routine checks. Paisley finally allowed herself to sink into a chair between their beds. Every muscle in her body ached from tension. Her head felt heavy, her thoughts moving like molasses. But her heart was full as she watched the twins sleeping safely. Elena draped a blanket over Paisley's shoulders. Rest, she whispered. You've done enough. More than enough. Paisley nodded, too exhausted to speak. Her eyes drifted closed as she listened to the strong, healthy heartbeats of the children who had become her family. For the first time since the funeral, she could truly breathe. The room settled into peaceful quiet, broken only by the soft, steady beeping of monitors showing two strong hearts finally beating as they should. Outside the window, stars began to appear in the darkening sky, witnesses to the miracle of love and healing that had unfolded in that hospital room. 1 week after the dramatic hospital scene, sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Langford penthouse. Paisley stood by the window, watching the city buzz below, while holding a newspaper with her own face on the front page. The headline read, Guardian Angel, the remarkable story of Paisley Thompson. She could hardly believe how much had changed. Victor Langford sat in a maximum security cell, his carefully constructed world crumbling as evidence mounted against him. The toxicology reports, the security footage, his financial records. Everything pointed to a calculated plan to slowly poison the twins and seize control of Langford Industries during the ensuing chaos. The media couldn't get enough of the story. A homeless woman with an extraordinary gift, drawn by divine intervention to save 2 children moments before burial. It read like fiction, yet every word was true. The morning shows wanted interviews, publishers called with book deals, social media buzzed with clips of Paisley leaving the courthouse after testifying against Victor. In the kitchen, Elena prepared breakfast while the twins sat at the counter, their healthy faces a stark contrast to the pale, lifeless children from just days ago. Grace hummed as she colored, while Noah carefully arranged his cereal into patterns. "Paisley!" Grace called out, waving her over. "Come see what I drew." Paisley crossed to the counter, her bare feet silent on the marble floors. She still wasn't used to the luxury surrounding her, but the children's warmth made it feel more like home every day. Grace held up her drawing, a picture of 6 people holding hands under a rainbow. "That's Daddy, and Mommy, and Noah, and me, and you, and that's God watching over all of us." Paisley's throat tightened with emotion as she studied the crayon figures. "It's beautiful, Grace. Thank you." The elevator chimed, and Gareth stepped out, already dressed for the office but carrying a thick folder instead of his usual briefcase. His face had softened over the past week, the haunted look replaced by something lighter. "Good morning, everyone," he said, kissing Eleanor and hugging each child before turning to Paisley. "Do you have a moment? There's something I'd like to discuss." They moved to the living room while Eleanor supervised breakfast. Gareth sat across from Paisley, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Paisley," he began, "I owe you an apology, a deep one. When you first came into our lives, I treated you with suspicion and doubt. I let my fears and prejudices cloud my judgment, even as you repeatedly proved yourself. I'm deeply sorry." Paisley started to speak, but Gareth held up his hand. "Please, let me finish. You didn't just save our children's lives, you saved our family. You exposed a betrayal we never saw coming. You brought light back into our home, and I want to make things right." He opened the folder and spread several documents on the coffee table. "First, I've set up a trust fund in your name. It's enough to ensure you'll never have to worry about housing or education again. Second, there's an apartment in our building, the one on the 3rd floor with the garden terrace. It's yours if you want it." Paisley's eyes widened. "Mr. Langford, I can't accept—" "Gareth, please." He corrected gently. "And yes, you can. But that's not all." He pulled out another document. "I'm establishing the Paisley Thompson Foundation. It will provide support for foster youth with unique gifts or challenges. Children who might otherwise fall through the cracks, like you almost did. I'd like you to help run it." Tears welled in Paisley's eyes as she stared at the papers before her. A home, a purpose, a future she never dared imagine. Elena appeared in the doorway, having overheard. "There's one more thing, Paisley." She crossed the room and sat beside her, taking her hands. "We'd like you to stay. Not just nearby, but as part of our family. The twins need you. We need you. Will you consider it?" Paisley looked between them, these people who had become more family to her in a week than anyone else had in her entire life. She thought of the twins, of their pure love and trust. She thought of Elena's maternal warmth and Gareth's transformed heart. "Yes," she whispered, then stronger. "Yes, I'd love to stay." The sound of small feet padding across the floor interrupted them. Noah and Grace burst into the room, sensing the emotional moment. "Is Paisley crying?" Grace asked worriedly. "Happy tears, sweetheart," Paisley assured her, opening her arms as both children climbed into her lap. "Can we show Paisley our playroom?" Noah asked his parents. We made something special." With permission granted, the twins pulled Paisley down the hallway to their brightly coloured playroom. The walls were covered in their artwork, but they led her to a special corner where several new drawings were carefully arranged. "Look," Grace pointed proudly. "This is us at the park." "And this is us having dinner," Noah added. "And this is us at Christmas," Grace continued. Paisley's heart swelled as she studied each picture. In every single one, she was there, holding hands with the twins, sitting at the family table, standing beside Elena and Gareth. The children had drawn her into every scene of their future, not as an outsider, but as an integral part of their family. Noah tugged at her sleeve. "Do you like them?" Paisley knelt down, gathering both children into a tight hug. "I love them," she whispered. "I love them so much." Through the playroom window, the morning sun cast rainbow patterns on the floor. Paisley held the twins close, breathing in their sweet, healthy scents, listening to their strong, steady heartbeats. She thought of all the drawings yet to be made, all the moments yet to be shared, all the love yet to be given and received. She was home. Finally, truly home. Soft spring sunlight bathed the newly constructed Paisley Thompson Foundation building. Cherry blossoms dotted the courtyard where hundreds of guests gathered for the grand opening ceremony. Television cameras lined the back, broadcasting the event to millions across America. Paisley stood at the podium, her hands trembling slightly as she smoothed her navy blue blazer. The face that looked back at her from the teleprompter screen seemed transformed from the desperate woman who had crashed a funeral just months ago. Her eyes held peace now, and her smile carried confidence. "Good morning," she began, her gentle voice carrying across the hushed crowd. "I stand before you today not as someone special, but as living proof that miracles still happen, that second chances exist, that sometimes the gifts we think make us different are actually divine purposes waiting to be revealed." She paused, looking at Elena and Gareth in the front row, their faces beaming with pride. "I was a forgotten foster child, moving from home to home, carrying what seemed like a curse, the ability to hear heartbeats others couldn't detect. I felt lost, unwanted, broken. But God had a greater plan." Her voice grew stronger as she continued. "That gift led me to 2 precious children who needed help when no one else could hear their cry. It led me to a family who chose to listen when others would have turned away. And now it leads me here, to a foundation dedicated to supporting foster children with unique gifts and challenges." Tears glistened in her eyes as she gestured to the building behind her. "This place will be a sanctuary where different isn't wrong, where unusual abilities are celebrated, not feared, where every child will know they are heard, seen, and valued." As she finished her speech, Noah and Grace burst from their seats, racing toward the podium. "Paisley! Paisley!" they called out in unison, their faces glowing with health and joy. Paisley knelt down, gathering them into her arms as cameras flashed. "Our forever angel," Grace declared, loudly enough for the microphone to catch, making the audience chuckle warmly. Gareth and Elena joined them, creating a family tableau that moved many viewers to tears. Elena wrapped her arm around Paisley's shoulders while Gareth stood protectively behind them all, his hand resting gently on Paisley's back, a father's quiet gesture of support. Across America, elderly viewers watching from their homes felt their hearts lift. Social media lit up with messages about hope and second chances. News anchors wiped away tears as they reported on the former homeless woman who had saved 2 children and exposed a criminal plot now transformed into a beacon of hope for forgotten children everywhere. That evening, the Langford penthouse filled with the warm aromas of a home-cooked celebration dinner. The formal dining room, once a place of tension and strict protocol, now rang with laughter and casual conversation. Paisley sat at the center of the long table, between the twins, helping Noah cut his chicken while listening to Grace's animated story about her school day. Elena passed the rolls, pausing to squeeze Paisley's shoulder affectionately. Gareth watched his expanded family with contentment, his eyes crinkling at the corners when Paisley caught his gaze, and smiled. After dinner, Paisley helped tuck the twins into bed, a nightly ritual that had become precious to all of them. She sat between their beds, holding their hands as they drifted toward sleep. "Paisley," Noah mumbled drowsily. "Yes, sweetheart." "Will you listen to our hearts like you always do?" Paisley closed her eyes, focusing on the sound she once thought was a curse. There they were, two strong, steady heartbeats, healthy and vibrant, playing a duet of life and love. Tears of gratitude slipped down her cheeks as she whispered, "They sound perfect. Just perfect." She stayed there in the dim room, holding their small hands, overwhelmed by how completely her life had changed. From a desperate woman with nothing to her name, she had become not just someone with a home and purpose, but someone with a family who loved her completely. The soft nightlight cast a gentle glow across the sleeping children's faces as Paisley whispered her nightly prayer of thanks. For second chances, for divine timing, for the mystery of gifts that seem like burdens until their purpose is revealed, and for the miracle of finding home in the most unexpected places. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.